All right, let's look at the selection sort algorithm today. With the bubble sort, we went through the entire array and moved it one position at a time, each of the items, to getting them in position. It's not a very efficient way to sort your array, but it works. And so you'll see the bubble sort used a lot of times. The selection sort will go through and takes a look at our entire array and finds the smallest value and moves it to the first position. And then it looks at the rest of the array, finds the smallest value in the second position on, and moves it to the second position, and so on through. Now, it's not doing all of that ton of moving around, and it's not as many times looking at it. So, in the selection sort, first time through, that when it goes to go through, the first thing it's going to do is look at that first value in the array, and it's going to assign that value to a storage location there, as that's the low one, and the position in the array it's in, which at that point is in the 0 position, since they're doing their arrays based on 0 as the low level. Then it compares that value to the second item in the array, which is number 1, and sees which one's smaller. If the one in the second position is smaller, it assigns it to that storage location and assigns that index number to the storage location also, and works on through on it till it's made it all the way through the array. It's now found the smallest value. It will now swap whatever that smallest value is with the first position. So if it happened to be the 5th position, it's going to swap what's in the 5th position with the first position. And now at this point, the first time through, you know which one's the smallest value. That's been set there. Then it's going to loop through a second time, start from the second position, and go on through and find the smallest value again. But it started from the second position. So the one it already knows was smallest is in the first, and we're leaving it alone. Find the smallest one belongs second, put it in position, and then loop through again to find the third one. So if you look at the coding over on page 357, that you'll see it takes a double loop to do it. So there's 2 4s there. One that starts from the 0 position, and you're only going to go up to, on the outer loop, to the array size -2. Because you don't need to get to the top one, because it's going to automatically be in position when you get to the end. So you're only going up to the next to the top one to compare those two at the very end to see if it's the next to largest, and if it is, swap them, and then they're all correct. In that loop, we'll set the min. They use the value min index. Whatever you want to call it. And then they got a value of min value. Min index is where they're going to store the index number, so they'll set it to whatever is their for variable. In their case, it was start scan, which they ranged from 0 to array size -2. And you can get the array size at any time easily enough. I'm not sure if they used a function to do it, or if they just knew what it was. They brought in a constant for it. That's interesting. Okay. I'm going to say they changed names, but yeah, they did change names into this function. And then they're going to set whatever the value of that first one is, in their case, to min value. Now, you don't have to use mean value, you don't have to use min index. Just use something that you know that it is the minimum value in the array, and that it's the minimum, that is the index number for that minimum value. Then they set another loop in there that's going to loop through the entire array for that time of just comparing that first, second, third, whichever element to finding to the rest. So it's for that one, they called it index, ran it from start scan, which is the number from their upper loop, because they only need to start from the next position up from where that one was set that we're looking at. So if we started in 0, now the inner loop's going to work from 1 through how many ever elements we got. Well, that's 1. If we're starting on if we're to the third element, we're looking for the third lowest value, that we're going to run it from the fourth value through the max, the size of the array minus 1. So that will keep us on the whole thing on it. And then all we're doing is setting up an if in there to compare the array index to that min value that we initially set, and to see if the array index is less than that minimum value. If it is, then we found a smaller number. So then we got to set those two values again for where we are at and what the value of that element is in the array. If it's not less than that min value, there's nothing to do. Just in the if and in the for to click on to the next value and continue on through. Why have they even got that module in there? I don't know. And then they've got an extra little module sitting here at the end of their program section that's left over from the other assignment that says a module swap, but we don't need that one because we're not swapping the elements. We're swapping them from up. So then we set that to that. Oh, and then we call it swap, yeah. And that we tell it what's that min index and what's that start scan number. And and so we'll just swap those values into those two positions. So you do use that swap part down there. Questions on how to do the selection sort? Are any questions on that? So it's going to run smoother than the other one, but it takes a little more thinking. But all you're doing is you got an entire array there, and you're just looking across it. You're telling it to go across it and find the smallest value, put it in the first position. Then start at the next position and all the way through, find the second smallest value, put it in that second position, and so on through. And so you You are doing a swap, but you're just doing a swap for each position there. And that's all that's involved. If the one was over in the last position, was in the 50th position in the bubble sort, we would have had to bubbled it down 50 times. And this one is just one time that it gets switched. It goes straight to that first position. Questions on selection sort? All right, the insertion sort is their next one. And then this one, they're going to sort the first two. This one you're not going to likely use out there. That you're going to sort the first two items, get them in order. And then you'll look at the next item and see where it fits back in the ones that are already sorted. And put it in the proper position there. So I don't think I've ever used this sort. I've used the selection sort and the bubble sort a number of times. If you're just doing a small array sort, the bubble sort works fine for you. And so in this one, you're just comparing the first two. Then you look at the third item and see where it fits in to the first two. Look at the fourth item and see where it fits in, and so on through. Which assignments did I give y'all? Because they don't say which algorithm you're going to use anyway. So you're just going to pick the one you like best. So probably not going to use the insertion one. The insertion one I've really not seen much on out there. But the insertion is going to be more efficient than the bubble, but it's going to be about the same as selection, and the selection one's usually the one people will use on that. Now, the binary search algorithm, which is the next one, gets into a little bit different on how it does. But with the insertion, you keep looking at and then put it back into the right position it belongs in there. As opposed to selection, you get the first one set, the second one set, the third one set, and the insertion, you got the first two items set, and then you keep inserting in the part that you know is already sorted. You insert the item you've got to where it belongs in there. So it gets a little bit more complicated, and it's probably beyond what y'all are. It's not probably, it's beyond what y'all are needing for your purposes here. Now, if you went on for a further mathematical degree in computers, you may bump into it, but I never used the insertion sort. That what I've never really bumped into off of it. All right, questions on the insertion. Y'all see what the insertion does? Sorts first two items and then sticks each item in the proper place of what's already sorted when it looks at the next item. Selection goes through, finds the smallest one, puts it in place. Finds the next smallest one, puts it in place. Finds the next smallest one, puts it in place. Bubble sort just moves them along one position at a time until they end up where they belong. Bubble sort's the most inefficient one. All right, questions for me on those? Brandon? Todd? So make sure you're working on your assignments for Chapter 9, because they are due next Monday. Okay?
I also actually wanted to ask you a question. I mean, it's kind of off topic from this class. I
Okay.
wanted to ask you your opinion on, like, Windows 10. Like, how you think Windows 10 is, how it runs and everything. Just get inside look.
So I like Windows 10.
I like Windows 10.
So
It-
it's good for y'all.
It runs efficiently.
Operating system will run smooth as long as you have the efficient hardware to run it on.
Really, Windows 10 doesn't need that much hardware to run on,
Yeah, I know. It's lightweight.
because it's lighter weight than 7 and 8 were.
8
Okay.
was just a mess. It was clunky. It was hard to navigate. And
But
sometimes-
they've made 10 more efficient than the previous ones. So you can actually run 10 on some machines you couldn't run 7 on. Although I would have a bigger machine anyway. Okay. As far as how it works, it seems to work quite well on it. Now, you do have to have separate utilities from the previous ones, because utilities are written to the specific version. Windows 10 has the advantage of Windows 7 and 8 on the interface. It gives you back the menu like you had in 7. That's slightly different, but it's the basic menu. 7, it wasn't sorted. 10 keeps it sorted alphabetically for you. There's pros and cons on that. Once I got to using it a little bit, that I'm okay with using the sorted one on it. It's just sometimes having to remember what name is it under, because what the outer name of it, the grouping is not necessarily the name of the program you're looking for. Because you're looking for Acrobat, it's not under Acrobat, it's Acrobat under Adobe. That one's fairly simple. Some others, some freeware ones I'm using, I have to pause and think on, because they got a number of different things under them, and then their outer name wasn't quite as related to it. But it gives you the Windows 7 interface to it, so everybody who uses 7 should feel comfortable on 10 right off the bat. That it also gives you the Windows 8 interface, and you can get it to where you got the whole tablet appearance on it on 10, although it's not the easiest thing to get. Yeah, you can get to that. But it includes it right off the menu, that it lists all the stuff out there for you in that tablet approach on it. So if you liked the I can't think what they called those things. Not icons. There's something starts with an I also. That you can just click on those if you like that approach to it.
The reason I asked is because I got Windows 10 and I let a support person, he was doing that team viewer where he can control my laptop, but from his computer. He was looking through my background stuff, and it seemed like my Windows, like the service of Windows, off Windows 10, it was eating my CPU. It was just eating the background.
What kind of CPU you have? You know the model?
I didn't look at all.
Intel or whatever. You know, is it laptop?
Now, it is going to jump up and down depending on your usage. Windows 10 will make, when you're actually running stuff, Windows 10 will use all the resources it can get a hold of at that point while it's running, but it splits it all out. So you got to be careful on utilities that are measuring usage, that they're going to claim it's a different usage on it. But I found it runs just as well. It's running, actually some of my programs are running faster under 10 than they ran under 7. And you had somebody going into your machine from outside and told you that?
See, I was doing some stuff for my car, and I needed to hook the hardware up to my laptop to program it. And I couldn't get the hardware to work for some reason, so I called their support guy, and he was looking through our background stuff, seeing what was, like, he was enabling some stuff so the hardware would work, and he was checking it was just running slow and non-efficient. And he went through our background, was checking all that, and the first that popped up was the Windows 10 service, like online service, and it was bad. And he looked it up and he said, well, what I'm saying is there's been a lot of updates and everything, and that could be the reason. So I don't know. I just want to see your input on it. But I mean, since you and him both say it's efficient, then it has to be something else.
And you should have all updates out there automatically because Windows 10 updates itself regularly anyway. Just make sure you shut it down occasionally. Because there is a big update out there. That's the other thing is, have you shut it down recently?
Well, like turn the laptop off?
Mm-hmm. Gone to a full shutdown to shutting it down. You need to do that because I did run into this, and I've run into it on my machine and my church machine, that they've got a major update out there right now. I've heard some people say 10.3, but I haven't seen anything claiming it was 10.3. Last summer was the anniversary update, and now apparently they've got another major update to it floating out there, which I knew was out there. But like I say, I've heard some people trying to call it 10.3, but none of the stuff I've read has really called it any number to it. It's just that it's a good update out there on it. On both my machine and the church machine, it got where it wasn't running correctly on some stuff. And when I went to shut down, and then it takes about 10 minutes to run these updates. When it went to shutting down, it said, don't turn me off, that I'm doing updates. And then when you come back on, it was finishing doing updates, and then it went to working fine again. So my church one, the screens went crazy because we're doing similar to what we're doing in here. Because at church, I've got a monitor I'm looking at, and there's a projection screen that everybody's looking at. I could not get programs to get on the screens correctly, like they'd work just perfectly the week before and everything, and would not, the program we used would not do it for anything. And that the earlier service I hadn't been to, that's what they had told me was something was all messed up, and they got it to working, but it wasn't like it's supposed to be. And it was still goofed up for me, and I played with it a few minutes trying to switch stuff around and going, what in the world's happened, and who's done what to this machine? And then I just went, I'm just going to shut it down and bring it back on and see if that'll clear some settings or something. It went through the updates at that point, came back on, and the machine's worked fine ever since. My machine at home, it was giving some problems with the internet and something on it, and was acting peculiar on that and acting up. And this is all in the last week. That was Sunday a week ago on the church one. It was throwing some peculiarities. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it just wouldn't do some things exactly right for me. Shut it down. It went through doing installation, also doing the updates, and when it came back up, stuff's been working fine for me since. So my suggestion to you is do this, either do shutdown or restart. You could do restart. I did restart a church one, okay? But you want it to go through it, shut down, and starting back up, which either doing shutdown or doing restart will do for you, because restart does the shutdown. I would do one of those two things, because it was odd on those, and I've heard a couple other people say they had similar problems that apparently, I don't know what Windows has done, Microsoft has done, but somehow apparently they're putting something on there that's supposed to be a tickler to remind us to do our update that's actually goofing up some other stuff. And that may be a factor into what you're bumping into right there, since you're hitting it.
Like I said, it's just, my CPU, it's like, here's the CPU web here, and then here's everything else. I don't know what it is, but that's just
But
what.
CPU usage on Windows 10 is going to show solid usage anytime it's doing something. It's not going to be a partial usage. It goes to grabbing the whole thing.
I have an 8-core processor, so
Yeah, the laptop.
I have an actual full-blown desktop.
But my experience so far has been it wants, and from what I've read, it wants to grab everything it can when it goes to do anything.
Okay.
But it splits it out accordingly, according to the things it's doing, but it's going to use all the resources that it can possibly get its hands on, not just to limit itself on it at that point. But that's not slowing other stuff down because it's splitting them out like it's supposed to, but your resource usage is going to pretty much die from 0 to 100 and back and forth, and not sit anywhere in between on you. That you're not going to see CPU usage of 50% because it's just not going to do that now. Okay?
Thank you.
But it is picky, just like every other version of Windows has been, about drivers and all of that. You've got to have the right driver for drivers, and utility programs have got to use be the right version for Windows 10. And if that was you were going to hook it to hardware on the car, you said,
Yeah.
then probably that's going to have some specific drivers for Windows 10. And if they're trying to use Windows 7 ones or whatever, it's not going to be real happy with that. Okay? Just like your antivirus has to be updated to the Windows 10 version of it when you update, because the 7 or 8 version won't work in 10 because it's there's so much looking at individual pieces in there that the piece may not be there anymore that they use. Okay? Did that answer what you're...
Yeah, that helped a lot.
So you've been satisfied with it, haven't you, Brendan?
Yeah, I have.
You know, so
I haven't had any problems with it.
8?
I have a laptop.
8 did some odd things sometimes to me, and then I hated the selection, the GUI. I did not like the GUI on 8, and that was my biggest problem with 8.
I only use Windows 8 on a laptop, a Dell Inspiron. The Dell Inspiron was created in 2011, and it was running Windows 8, and everything started updating to Windows 8.1. However,
And 8.1 I actually liked a little better because they actually put a little bit of menu back into
However,
it.
they dropped all support for my Dell Inspiron in 2013, so there was no longer driver support for it. So the graphics drivers were never supported for 8.1, only 8. So I never updated to 8.1.
Should have new ones out there for them.
No, the drivers were specifically from Dell
Mhm.
because it had a thing called switchable graphics in it. It had it had a dedicated graphics card, an Intel HD 4000 graphics card, standard laptop graphics card. That was its dedicated graphics card. However, it had a switchable graphics card that you could switch to that had 2 gigs of dedicated video memory. It was an AMD Radeon HD 7750, I believe. And that is what would like run more graphics intensive applications.
Okay.
Well, it used a program that Dell made called switchable graphics, and whenever you launch a program, you can set it to high performance, which would use the 2 gigabyte card rather than the Intel card. Well, they dropped all support, and if I were to update to 8.1, there would be no drivers for that.
Should that 8.1 should have worked with the other drivers, but you
It
were
should
still
have.
on the same major version. But if you went to 10, you could have an issue on it, but if it's that new of one, it should be, they should have support out there for you still. That's odd. I'm not going to say that they don't, but they usually are going to. Now, sometimes they're a little slow on coming out with your drivers and stuff. So since 10's been out for a year and a half now, had it for 2 years, actually the beta version for over 2 years now, they should have some drivers for you, but they may or may not. Okay? 8.1 just didn't get used hardly at all, so a lot of places didn't even bother to do any work for 8.1 because they didn't have that much of users even switching to 8.1 because it was an optional upgrade and a lot of people didn't do it. Although, like I say, I liked 8.1 better than 8. They did a few little improvements on it, but I still didn't really care for it. But it was better than 8. But I don't like 8, if you didn't pick that one up. Okay? I didn't like Vista either.
I hated Vista.
Oh,
Okay.
Vista was a resource hog. That was the one that would always eat your CPU and RAM.
Vista, if you upgraded to Vista, you had to have an upgraded machine on it. And 7 came out and it was more efficient, and you could actually put 7 on machines that had been running XP, where Vista wouldn't upgrade on some of them. And you can actually put Windows 10. Also, an 8 used some more resources too. But you can actually put 10 on some older XP machines also, upgrade them to 10 without upgrading the machine. Again, with the efficiencies on it. Although, I probably wouldn't do that. You need to. If you still got the machine with XP, you probably need to upgrade it before you went to 10 anyway, or replace it. Okay? Because if it's an XP machine, you're looking at a machine that's more than 10 years old. Although, probably 40% of the Windows operating system usage out there is still XP.
That's the most popular one installed.
Because it's XP was the popular one. XP was finally after from 98 second edition was their next thing that finally got it all together correctly, and it did what they wanted to do when they left 98 second edition.
What was the Windows that came before 2000? It was 98, wasn't it?
No. ME,
ME? Millennium. Yeah.
which was a disaster.
Supposedly. I never actually got to use it.
Millennial wasn't very good. It had a lot of similarities to Vista. But Millennial was stuck out there at the last minute because Microsoft's convinced they got to put a new operating system out every year and a half.
Have you ever tried to use MS-DOS?
You used to use it all the time when you had no other
I
choice.
always hated if you wanted to use a different program or open up an application, you have to always mount something before being able to access it, and then you have to then look through your directories before you can find the root folder for the executable. That was the one thing that I hated about DOS.
Oh, with DOS it was purely character based, that you didn't have you did have the Windows add-on to it at the end, but DOS itself was purely character based, so you had to go find whatever on it. Same thing if you're using Linux or Unix, unless you happen, and their graphical user interfaces are limited on what they do, just like the original Windows were, which in both cases are just add-ons onto the operating system, not built into the operating
Do
system.
you know what the most installed software was back in the early 90s?
In the early 90s,
Early 90s, most installed software.
Not right off. It depends on your definition probably too.
The video game Doom.
Huh?
It was installed,
The what?
Doom, the video
Okay.
game. Doom was installed on more computers than Windows operating systems were.
But if you go back to the early 90s, you're actually back into where Windows was an add-on feature, not the operating system.
Yeah.
Okay, it would be, you actually bought and installed it separate from DOS and installed it on top of DOS, because at that point you're on Windows 1, 2, and 3. You were actually on Windows 3 at that point. And that was just an interface that ran on top of DOS. Okay? And like Doom would have just run straight on DOS. And then when Windows 95 came along, it was Windows incorporating the operating system. And Windows is actually still based off of that DOS operating system, although they've built it into a fully integrated package out there. But that's from Windows 95 forward. And that's also when they integrated the internet into it. All right, other questions?